Okay, so good evening, everybody, and welcome to the presentation. So I'm going to be speaking tonight about From Burnout to Resilience, which is a polyvagal informed perspective of burnout. So I'm going to be covering polyvagal theory. For those of you, there may be some of you watching this who haven't heard of polyvagal theory, or perhaps you've heard of it, but you don't really understand what it is. So we're going to be going through that in sort of finer detail, talking about neuroception, and a little bit about interoception as well. So this is all really about how we detect how our nervous system responds and picks up cues of either danger or safety. We'll be looking at burnout. What is burnout? How can we actually recover from burnout? The social engagement system. And then I'm going to be speaking a little bit about the Safe and Sound protocol, looking at some of the evidence around that, overview of the program and how I work with Safe and Sound protocol, and then time at the end for questions as well, if anybody has any questions around that. Okay. So a little bit about me. I work with both individuals and organizations. I use a trauma-informed approach to reduce stress and overwhelm, which in turn facilitates improved productivity, performance, and success. So I'm an accredited ICF somatic trauma-informed coach. I'm a qualified therapist as well, so specifically EMDR therapy. I'm qualified in CBT as well, and various forms of talk therapies. I also facilitate training sessions to organizations as well. So I partner with the Mental Wellbeing Company, and we have a range of CPD accredited workshops and trainings. So with sort of a variety of different topics, from mental health first aid, we do positive psychology for teams, we do trauma-informed workshops for organizations, and those are sort of gaining a lot of popularity as we go. So it's really great that I would say overall organizations especially are becoming more interested in trauma, and especially since COVID, since lockdown, that's the word trauma has become a bit of a buzzword. And it's really good to see that corporations are starting to sort of ask questions about that, which is fantastic. So a little bit about polyvagal theory. So polyvagal theory is a theory that was developed by he's actually a Professor Stephen Porges. And it really is all about how our autonomic nervous system responds to stress, safety, and social interactions. So some of you may be familiar with the polyvagal ladder. The polyvagal ladder, I think, is a really great tool at helping us to understand our nervous systems. And I think if we can understand how we are wired, how our nervous system works, it gives us a huge amount of awareness in how we can manage on a day-to-day basis. So essentially, if we look at that ladder, we have 3 different states. So at the top of the ladder, we have our ventral vagal. This is what we call the safe and social system. And when we're in that ventral vagal state, this is when we feel connected. We feel, not only do we feel connected to ourselves, but we feel connected to the greater world. So we have a tremendous sense of safety when we're in that ventral vagal state. When we are triggered, so something stressful happens, something traumatic happens, we move into what we call the sympathetic activation. So we start moving down the ladder, and this is when there's lots of adrenaline running through the system. This is what we commonly know as fight-flight response. And essentially the brain's perception of danger becomes heightened when we're in that sympathetic response. So this is really where stress begins, okay? The bottom of the ladder is what we call dorsal vagal. And this is when we go into a type of a shutdown, or we could call it a freeze response, where we feel that we can't cope. We feel collapsed and shut down. So the purpose of working with this model is it forms a scientific framework for why we feel safe, anxious, or shut down in specific situations. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, having awareness is so helpful and useful in helping us to understand ourselves and our emotions, our thoughts, and our behavior, because they all very much influenced by that polyvagal ladder and where we are on that ladder. So how we respond obviously affects our decision making, which in turn affects our performance, how productive we are, and our social interactions as well. So I'm just going to go through each of the 3 states, just to give you a clearer understanding of how we would define these states. The ventral vagal so that's the top of the ladder, and this is really social engagement. We will know when we're there because first and foremost, you're going to feel relaxed in your body. Your muscles are relaxed. There'll be steady breathing. You'll be able to think clearly. This is really a state of homeostasis, balance, well-being, flexibility, safety, neutrality. It's when our rational, logical, reasoning brain is fully online. Warm, open, resourcefulness, resilience, play, joyful, peace, presence. These are all words associated with that ventral vagal state. Co-regulation. This is a state when we're in that ventral vagal where we are able to co-regulate with others, where we're able to connect with others from a place of being open as opposed to being defensive. There's compassion here, there's creativity here. And the thought process when we're here is very much I can and I am. So this is when you're going to feel really motivated, you're going to feel really open, really creative. And it is really a place of exploration and resourcefulness and clarity. So then we move into the sympathetic activation. This is when we become stressed and we move into that fight-flight response. And this is a state where we become mobilized. So the body starts to mobilize energy. You have lots of adrenaline running through your system. Your muscles might become really tight. That heart rate increases. And so you're really on high alert. Now, sympathetic activation is a defensive state. It's what we call going into survival. So it's actually a threat response. And when we move into that state, our brain's perception of danger becomes heightened. So that doesn't mean that what's happening in the world around us is necessarily dangerous, but our brain will perceive it to be dangerous, okay? So there's a reduced capacity for regulation when we go into fight-flight. Now, a little bit of fight-flight activation energy is actually really important because it helps to motivate us, it helps to move us forward, it helps us to take action in our normal everyday life. So, when you're in the workplace, you want to have some of that sympathetic energy running through your system. But the trouble comes in where that sympathetic energy becomes all-consuming, and it shifts up to the far end of the spectrum where you begin to experience anxiety, fear, ruminating thoughts, hypervigilance, reactivity, sometimes sort of anxiety attacks, panic attacks. Those are all words very much associated with that fight-flight response. And your thought process goes from I can to I must. So that energy becomes a lot more sort of frenetic. Now, it's important to note that we do get mixed states as well. So this is very, I'm giving you the basic states, but there's a lot of nuances around this. So we can, for example, have a mixed state where there's a mixture of that sympathetic fight-flight as well as ventral vagal as well. So it is really, really possible to have, as I say, those mixed states, okay? So I wanted to just then move in. So we've spoken about the ventral vagal, we've spoken about the sympathetic activation, which is that fight-flight response. So then we move into dorsal vagal, which is right at the bottom of the ladder. And this is what we would call shutdown. So when we've been in that fight-flight sympathetic activation for a long time, it becomes really overwhelming for the system. And that's when we go into that shutdown where everything's just become too much. And this is when we may experience emotional exhaustion, fatigue, lethargy. There's a reduced capacity to cope when people go into that shutdown response. So you may become defensive, withdrawn. Clients will say things like, I feel numb, I feel disconnected, I feel detached, isolated, low, sad, depressed, frozen. And there's really that sense in the body of just not being able to take action, not being able to move forwards. So it's very much, as I say, a state of emotional exhaustion. And our thought process then moves from I can, which is that beautiful ventral vagal state we have at the top of the ladder, to I must, which is that sympathetic activation, and then it drops down to I can't. And this is where people just feel like they've had enough and they just want to lock themselves away, so to speak. So just talking a little bit about neuroception. Neuroception is all about our brain's ability to detect signs of threat or safety. So this happens unconsciously. We're not even aware that this is happening, but we are able to, that incredible nervous system that we have is able to pick up signs of threat or safety. So body language, tone of voice, eye contact, the way that somebody might give you a look that could either send you into feeling safe or feeling threatened, but you may not be aware of that. Things like smells, sounds, things that you see, places, all sorts of very, very subtle cues that our nervous system's picking up on. And then interoception is our ability to sense those internal body sensations. So things like, hunger or pain or tension in the actual body. Okay. So with coming back to that polyvagal theory, then, if the cues of safety that we're picking up from our environment, both internal and external, are greater than the cues of danger, then we're going to go into that shift into that ventral vagal, where we're going to feel relaxed, composed, open, connected, curious, at ease. We're going to have this increased capacity to self-regulate and to also co-regulate with others from that beautiful, open, connected place where we feel safe, okay? If, on the other hand, the cues of danger are greater than cues of safety, then our system's going to become a little bit activated and we're going to become defensive or hypervigilant, feeling overwhelmed, feeling reactive, feeling like we're out of control. And there's a reduced capacity there for self-regulation and co-regulation, because essentially we're in a protective state, okay? So we're going to go into that defensive sort of mode, so to speak. So talking a little bit about the social engagement system, we talk a lot about the social engagement system in polyvagal theory, and this is really a hybrid state of activation and calming that plays a role in our ability to socially engage. It can only be accessed through the ventral vagal state. And it allows for the emergence of co-regulation, which supports a sense of safety and connection with other people, and also the capacity for self-regulation. So I think, and something that I've really learned from the work that I've done, is that when we are really social creatures, we are wired to engage with other people. And I've certainly seen that when I've been working with clients, that people tend to do better when they're in groups or when they've got, when they're sort of maximizing that time that they get to spend with other people. So, for example, in a working situation, for example, when people work from home a lot, I always say, try and get to, even if you can do co-working with others for a couple of days a week, or just making sure that you're having meetings where you've got people around you, where you're able to co-regulate. Working with a therapist or a coach, that's a great example of co-regulation, because that is so important, really, really important. So when we talk about burnout, we can define burnout as a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. And so many people as you all know, so many people suffer from burnout. I see it all the time with clients that I work with. They've got these busy lives. It's all go, 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 right? So really high pressure jobs, working long hours. And eventually, they get to the point where they just feel emotionally exhausted. There might be cynicism, and detachment is very much a part of burnout, and a reduced sense of personal accomplishment as well often accompanies that burnt out state, where people just feel absolutely wiped out, like they have no capacity to manage anymore. From a polyvagal informed insight, though, burnout is actually not just about workload. So it's about, if we refer back to that ladder I was talking about earlier, it's very much about a lack of safety, regulation, and connection. So effects, if we look at the effects of burnout as well, burnout may be likened to a prolonged state of sympathetic activation followed by dorsal collapse. So, we see this a lot with people where they go for years, work, and then eventually just get to that point where they just, as I say, feel like shutting down. In chronic stress, we tend to override signals from our body. So again, I find this with clients a lot that I work with, especially in the first couple of sessions, where I'm trying to encourage them to sort of tune into the somatic, when we get into the somatic work, tuning into the cues from the body. And it can be quite hard to do that when you're in stress. There's a disconnection as well in chronic stress from the social engagement system. So this results in isolation, miscommunication, difficulty in asking for help. Planning and decision making is impaired. So there's a huge impact on the prefrontal cortex when people are constantly in that survival, stress. It's all about survival. And that's when decision making can become difficult. The amygdala, which is the alarm system in the brain, becomes overactive. So that's very much that fight flight little alarm that we have when that stress response becomes hardwired. It's almost like people are constantly in that state of feeling hypervigilant, feeling overwhelmed, feeling afraid, easily triggered. And there's something called the HPA axis, which governs the stress hormone release. And this can also become dysregulated under a long-term load. So we can really see that burnout can, it can cause a lot of issues for people. It can be quite hard to recover from as well. Chronic burnout can hardwire threat-based responses. But the good news is that there is something called neuroplasticity, which is really the brain's ability to rewire with safety and repetition. And that's really where this kind of work comes in, the kind of work that I do with, polyvagal theory and working with the Safe and Sound protocol, etc. I just wanted to add in there as well that often burnout, and again, this is something that I've seen, that I've noticed in working with clients, especially women over the age of 40, where they are at that point in their lives where they're feeling just quite burnt out and quite overwhelmed. That then becomes exacerbated by perimenopause. So of course, where I've experienced this myself with declining hormone levels that just affect your mood, make you feel like you've got this terrible brain fog all the time. It affects your cognitive functioning. I mean, everything is affected by hormones, right? So if you add that onto burnout, and then more and more people, again, certainly more and more people I'm working with are being diagnosed with ADHD or autism. And then also if someone has an influential trauma history, all of these things just sort of compound the effects of burnout on people. So how then do we actually recover from burnout? So just a couple of things. A lot of people are using, and I know I've certainly trialed some of the cool technology that we have out there at the moment. So you have obviously your wearable nervous system trackers, things like the Whoop wristband. And I recently bought my son a Whoop actually. Things like the Oura Ring, Apple Watch, Garmin. These are all nervous system trackers that we can wear, and they track things like heart rate variability, which is quite a good way of monitoring your stress levels, sleep, etc. There are also things like biofeedback and neurofeedback devices that you can get, which track your brain waves and your heart rate patterns. Light and sound therapy. I don't know if anyone's trialed any of those. Devices like the Sensate or Insight Timer, which sort of tracks somatic sensations in the body, that sort of thing. Now, there are probably a lot more devices like this available on the market. One of the things I have found again is that often when people buy devices that they use themselves at home, that's absolutely great. But the only thing is, with nervous system regulation work, co-regulation is really, really important. And often I find that the people that are having that one-to-one interaction with a coach or with a therapist tend to progress, and they tend to see the effects because of the social engagement, and also because consistency is really, really key. So, you know, when people go away and they try and sort of do their own thing, so to speak, often it just doesn't last. And as I say, because they haven't got that co-regulation with a practitioner in that process, it might not be as effective. So this work is all about consistency, and bit by bit by bit by bit, you know, it's a little bit like taking medication. You can't just take 1 or 2 tablets and then expect your problem to go away. You have to obviously be consistent in, you know, whatever your doctor's sort of prescribed for you. So it's the same kind of thing here. So the other thing, apart from all these amazing devices, we can also work with polyvagal theory informed coaching, which is what I do. And this is where we will map the nervous system. So often in sessions with clients, we'll go through, you know, mapping the nervous system, which creates huge awareness, learning your patterns, learning how your individual nervous system works, because everybody's very different as well. Co-regulation practices, so establishing safe relationships within that therapeutic space, attuned communication, learning how to anchor in the ventral vagal state. So this is where things like different breathing techniques come in, and all sorts of different techniques using the VU breath, all sorts of different practices and protocols that we work with when it comes to polyvagal theory. And then really those little micro restorations that you can begin to implement in your own daily life. So we talk about daily nervous system hygiene versus reactive crisis management. So there's little tweaks that you can start to bring into your daily life. And then also in the coaching sessions, we bring in sort of cognitive interweave. So this is where we work with changing thought patterns, which is going into a little bit more of the CBT style of therapy or coaching, but it all helps to kind of weave everything in. Now, I wanted to talk to you as well about a little bit about the Safe and Sound protocol, because Safe and Sound protocol is a evidence-based listening therapy that was actually developed by Professor Stephen Porges, who founded the Polyvagal Theory. So there's a lot of evidence behind it. And it's really been designed to retune the nervous system for safety and connection. So it's a type of music that's actually been filtered to produce cues of safety So it's accessed via, as you can see in the image there, via headphones. So we actually wear headphones that cover the ear, and it's delivered. It can be delivered remotely. It can be delivered in person as well, preferably in person. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that in a few seconds. But essentially, it has documented effects in terms of improving social connection, emotional regulation, sensory regulation, improved executive function, so enhanced focus, which is really important for people with any sort of ADHD or autism, improved sleep, and a really interesting one I thought when I was doing the training in the Safe and Sound protocol is reduction in pain as well, which I thought was quite cool. So the science behind the Safe and Sound protocol is really, really interesting, because they actually did a study. They studied mothers, how they interact with their infants. This was a study done in 2022, actually. And what they did was they recorded mothers' voices as they interacted with their infants to examine what vocal features influenced the infants in terms of calming them down. And they found that the really, really low frequencies were associated with danger, as well as really, really high-pitched frequencies. So they found that strong middle frequencies with that reduced high and low frequencies with fluctuations in intonation actually produced a calming and regulating effect. So that was a really, really clever and really interesting study that was done there. Okay. There was a separate study that was done in 2021 where they looked at how the effect of music and how it promoted emotional bonding and reduced PTSD symptoms in mothers of premature infants. So that was another really great study that showed that the power of music and how it can really affect the nervous system. So this is just a little bit going into a little bit more detail in terms of how the Safe and Sound protocol actually works. So what they found was that when the middle ear muscles aren't functioning properly, very high or very low pitched frequencies are actually dominant, or they're actually perceived as being dominant. Now, factors that affect the functioning of the middle ear: if someone has an influential trauma history, if someone has autism spectrum disorder, or if someone's been in a chronic nervous system defense, so a state of burnout or chronic stress, these are all factors that affect the functioning of the middle ear. So this is what Professor Stephen Porges found out when he was doing his research, and I thought that was so interesting. So the Safe and Sound protocol actually seeks to recruit and exercise the middle ear muscles to better dampen low and loud frequency sounds. And the music is filtered so that mid-range frequencies are emphasized, promoting cues of safety. So what he's done is he's actually taken music, and a lot of the songs on the soundtracks in the Safe and Sound protocol are songs that you would know. So music that's sort of familiar tunes that we're all familiar with. But what he's done is he's just filtered out the really high and the really low pitched tones. So what happens is when you go through the protocol, the middle ear muscles actually contract and tighten the eardrum to allow the mid-range frequencies to be more easily perceived. So the perception then of middle frequencies will be altered, producing signals of threat, which shifts towards a defensive state. So it's actually so interesting how it works. Now, this is just a slide showing some of the real world evidence. And this was evidence that was collected by practitioners who had been using the Safe and Sound protocol on clients and sort of cohorts of clients. And they found that 61% of clients with anxiety symptoms moved from clinical to non-clinical. 54% of clients with depression moved from clinical to non-clinical. 63% of clients with trauma-related symptoms moved from clinical to non-clinical. And then 47% of clients experiencing psychosocial challenges, so sort of social anxiety, moved from impaired to non-impaired. So there's some pretty impressive results in terms of from an evidence perspective with the Safe and Sound protocol as well. So how it works, we really have 3 protocols within the Safe and Sound protocol. We have Connect, which is almost like the warm-up. We then have Core, and we then have Balance. So most of the therapeutic benefit comes from going through the Core protocol. We normally, if I'm working with a client, I'll normally start them off on Connect just to sort of get them warmed up, just to get them used to listening to the music. And then we move into the Core. So each protocol has a selection of playlists, and each playlist is 5 hours of music. So you have 5 hours in Connect, 5 hours in Core, and then 5 hours in Balance. Now, the music can be delivered supervised in person, preferably, and that can be online or face-to-face. And we start with between 5 to 30-minute chunks at a time. And this can be followed by clients going off and practicing, so following up at home. You do get the remote access to the playlist on your phone, so you can actually sort of listen to your phone, connect your headphones, and then listen through your phone. But it really depends on the client's capacity to self-regulate. So how I normally like to work is to do some co-listening with the clients that I'm working with, and then allow you, as I say, to go away and to sort of follow up on home, sort of do 10-minute or 20-minute chunks yourself as you move through the different protocols. And the Safe and Sound protocol is really quite adaptable because it can be delivered in conjunction with coaching or polyvagal informed practices, nervous system mapping, somatic techniques, havening techniques, CBT skills, EMDR. So it can be delivered in conjunction and as an add-on to other sort of modalities as well. So this is just a little bit of information about my current membership and my current one-to-one coaching package that I do, where we bring Safe and Sound protocol into that. So I have a membership which is starting on the 7th of June, and this is called Vibrant, Calm and Connected. We have in the membership, we have bi-monthly group sessions where we actually work through the Safe and Sound protocol. So we have co-regulating and co-listing sessions in those groups. And then those sessions include trauma-informed coaching, resourcing, support, Q&A. Every session will do sort of slightly different topic around polyvagal theory, but then making sure that we move through that SSP. In the membership, you get one-to-one session a month, as well as the bi-monthly group sessions, and then you get remote access to the Safe and Sound protocol playlists, and you get access to a private Facebook group as well. And that is $197 per month. And then I have the Vibrant, Calm and Connected program, which is 7 weekly one-to-one sessions. And these can either be weekly or bi-monthly. So this would be for someone who wanted to just sort of work through the Safe and Sound protocol in conjunction with some somatic trauma-informed coaching, just moving through the whole thing from start to finish. So that's 7 weekly sessions or 7 one-to-one sessions, and you can move through the whole program, and that is $897, and those are inclusive of VAT as well. So I think I may have mentioned this at the start of the presentation as well. Something else that I'm doing at the moment is training for organizations, businesses. We've got I'm partnering with a company called the Mental Wellbeing Company, and we have basically a plethora of CPD accredited workshops that we do. So we go into organizations and businesses, and we do sort of 90-minute trauma-informed practice and awareness training. Basically, our workshops are very much based on the polyvagal informed work. So everything that I've spoken to you about in this presentation is really forms the foundation of these workshops. And we've had some incredible feedback from companies just saying, this is just such a different way of looking at stress, you know, understanding the nervous system, understanding polyvagal theory. And we've even had requests from companies, you know, asking for sort of group sessions for employees where we can sort of work through the SSP together. So schools as well, we currently doing trauma-informed workshops for parenting workshops and for schools, for teachers, etc. So it's a very, very exciting time because from what we're seeing as well is people are really taking an interest in how we can work on managing stress in the workplace and learning how to really prevent burnout, right? Because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. So I'm just going to move on to Q&A, and if anybody has any questions, for those of you who are watching this on replay as well,
Ali, can you hear me?
Please feel free to reach out. Petra, yes, I can. Go for it. Yeah. Hello, Petra?
Oh, yes. You're back. It was frozen for a few minutes. Well, thank you for that. It was a really wonderful presentation, and I learned a lot that I didn't know. Also, I'm very much interested in the corporate work that you're doing because my company is a remote company that definitely builds stress very much on everyone. And my question is, does trauma go away with neuroplasticity eventually?
Oh, that's a very interesting question, Petra. I don't think anyone will be able to say that it does eventually go away, because I think that would be a huge claim to make. But there is evidence to show that the brain can be rewired. You know, neuroplasticity is a thing. So what I would say is that it can certainly move people from being traumatized to a place where they're able to process and reintegrate a lot of that. Yeah. So I'm not going to say, yeah, sure, you'll get to a place where you'll have absolutely no trauma, but it's certainly with that step by step, bit by bit approach, you certainly can process and help it's about helping your brain to lay down new neural pathways, you know. That essentially is what neuroplasticity is all about, but it does take a lot of repetition. Yeah, it's just literally all about repetition and this kind of work. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions?
Hi there, Alison. Can you hear me? It's
Hi,
Shireen.
Sharina. Yeah, lovely to see, I can't see you, but lovely to hear from you.
And to you too. Thank you so much for an excellent presentation. Just echoing on from Petra's question, we see a broad number of persons, different ages, and with different degrees of trauma. And we talk about neuroplasticity, which you mentioned, and can that still be achieved in later years, like from the 60s pluses?
Again, we know, Sharina, and I know that you're fully aware of this, that the younger, you know, with children, the brain's ability, neuroplasticity abilities is kind of, it's easier in children, right? But from what I've seen and from what I've learned, yes, you can still achieve that neuroplasticity. So obviously not as much as it would be in childhood, but people will definitely be able to process. Again, it's about being able to process that trauma in a safe and you know, in a safe environment, really, with that co-regulation from a therapist or a trained practitioner. But again, it's very much about repetition and safety and consistency, I would say.
So the main point really is that reestablishing new habits, the discipline in the training, the new training, right?
Yes, yeah. And allowing your brain to kind of put down those new pathways associated with safety. Yeah.
Got it. And is there much role in supplements and, different forms of diet enhancement? Some people talk about saffron, etc., to enhance neuroplasticity.
That's a great question, and I think that would probably be a question for maybe for a nutritionist or someone like that. But I would have thought that, and again, from what I've learned, that diet can play a role. Nutrition is really important in terms of how it affects our brains. Yeah, as are hormones, as you know, and looking at things like HRT in women over the age of 40, I think that's so important as well. I've actually gone through in the process of going through the whole process of looking at bioidentical hormones and having my bloods done and my labs done and stuff, which is something you can't get on the NHS as standard, but I think it can be quite shocking to see actually some of the things like testosterone and stuff that you don't normally think of, but actually, our just testosterone levels decline as well in midlife or post midlife, we could say. So I would say, I'm very much a believer in a holistic approach, and having the right supplements, but doing the blood tests first to make sure which supplements, which vitamins you are deficient in as well. I think that's also important.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much. It's been so interesting, Alison.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for attending as well. So I'm going to end it there. I'm going to end the recording as well, unless there are any other questions. Thank you for those of you who have attended. And if you are watching this on replay, as I say, if you do have any questions, please feel free to message me. And thank you very much, everybody. Stop recording.